Good afternoon, everybody. I'd like to call this meeting to order, the House Technology and Infrastructure and Innovation Committee. I think in the future, let's just call it TI Square to be a lot faster to get it going. But anyways, thank you very much for coming. I understand that it's a committee day. Representative Kendrick asked a clarification question on committee days. Yes, we encourage you in t-shirts and in jeans. This is a technology committee. It's not formal. Yes, Senator Albers, you're perfectly acceptable to do that. The problem is, I believe you're going to Senate Finance right after this. Yeah, you'd have to get it back on. But anyways, in all seriousness, thank you. The agenda is slightly changed. We want to accommodate as many folks as possible. We're going to go 111 first. Then we're going to go 9, and then we're going to go 177. I do believe that 111 is going to take a little bit more, as then my wife calls it a hot minute. She can't define a hot minute, but I believe this will take longer than a hot minute. 111 will, as will 9, and then we'll get to 177. The goal is to get done before 4 o'clock, because there is a presentation that we'd like to give to the committee, and we want to be able to leave at least 15 minutes for that. So with that stated, unless there's any additions or modifications to the agenda, members of the committee? Hearing none. Senator Albers.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman, and honorable members of this committee. It's great to be before you again. Before I start specific on the bill, I want to thank all of those. You allowed a subcommittee to perform, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Thomas led that for AI. At the same time, I was leading a study committee in the Senate for AI. And rather than go our two separate ways, I think we really enacted good government. We partnered together. We held numerous joint meetings in different areas of the state, looking at different verticals, different industries, how all those things came together. We worked on everything from a definition to basic foundational principles for what we thought as a state was right, to make sure we had the right place for Georgia to be, to have guardrails for artificial intelligence. Now, I'll tell you, there's some states that have really gone off the cliff on this, and I think got way ahead of where both the science, the technology, and the people are at. And we didn't want to be that way. But we also came up with the framework of thinking, if we're going to say the number one place for business, we have to be the number one place for artificial intelligence at the same time. And with that, one of the foundational items that Chairman Thomas and I worked on together is the Georgia Consumer Privacy Protection Act, which you heard last year. It is substantially the same, but we work with every stakeholder you can imagine. Some of them are here today that will be able to speak. Yeah, I'm getting a little feedback, I think. I really want to begin by thanking Mason Rainey with the Technology Association of Georgia. We're all familiar with TAG, as well as we've got representatives from TechNet, from business associations, chambers of commerce, large companies, small companies, mid-sized companies who work together to really craft this bill appropriately. There are 20 of these that have passed in states now, and there are 28 more that are actively going through the legislative process, which I believe most all will pass this year. I always like to say I don't want to be first in Georgia, but we certainly don't want to be last. Another important component here is, I know sometimes we all think, wouldn't it be great if we just had one standard? If there was something across the country that could solve this one time, so our businesses and consumers could have that one single solution. I wish that were true. However, what we did do in order to mitigate that is, I've been a part of a multi-state policy group that's members of House and Senate all over the country who are techie folks like us, working on that to make sure these bills all look substantially similar. So you'll see that we worked very much in concert in doing that. So Senate Bill 111 is a culmination of all that work for the last 2 years. It appropriately is named the Georgia Consumer Privacy Protection Act to protect both consumers as well as the businesses. If you think about this world we live in where everything is connected, with the advent originally just of us getting stuff on the internet to now being in artificial intelligence, our personal information is everywhere. In fact, it gets a little scary. We've all seen that happen one way, shape, or form in our lives. We're also concerned about our data being stolen. Probably everybody here at one point or another has got one of those letters in the mail that said we had a data breach. And your data was somehow compromised, or certainly, if not you, someone in your family or your close friend group. We share our financial information online. We share our personal information online. Data has become the modern day version of gold or oil. And we want to make sure that your data is personal to you, is protected as much as possible. There are real threats in this world, and our online threats are much, much more pervasive than they are anywhere else. And I'm going to give you one quick example. As a society, we spend 99.9% of all the dollars to fight crime, as an example, against physical crime. Yet 99.9% of all the monetary crime committed happens online. Let that sink in for a moment of how important this is. The approach we took, though, is to make sure it's very clear that you own your data and you have the ability to make sure people aren't target marketing and reselling your data without your permission. Some people like that. I got a couple of friends that absolutely love it. They want to click on their social media feed and find out they've been shopping for shoes or for swimming pools and have everyone come up. But many of us do not. Also, when you have left somewhere and there's no reason for it, for someone not to needlessly hold on to your data, where you can eliminate that information as needed. Most of that comes down to terminology, which many of you have heard of, which is personally identifiable information, or you will hear in the abbreviation PII. You've heard that for many years in a different form called PHI. That's protected health information. That's under HIPAA, which started over 20 years ago now. So as we work to make sure we came up with a good Privacy Protection Act, we wanted to make sure that Georgia citizens could comfortably engage in all your normal digital activities, knowing your data is protected and you have the right and recourse should privacy be compromised. Last year, we did have some folks that wanted to add a private right of action to this bill. Let me be clear, that is not in this bill. So this is more than just legislation. This is also a statement of who we are, what we are, and how we work together to get things done. This is a very carefully crafted compromise to get everybody to where it is today. I know there's some folks today on the committee that would seek to bring amendments to the bill to add things that are substantially different from what the bill is for. And let me tell you why I would ask you not to bring those amendments. First off, I believe it'll actually hurt and probably kill the bill. But more importantly, this is substantially similar to every other bill that's out there. We want to stay in the middle of those guardrails so consumers and businesses see things being the same so they can react accordingly. I mentioned all the people that support this bill. I think this is a way that each one of us can show our commitment to our constituents and their rights. Because you've seen this bill before, I'm not going to read every section of mine, but I want to just go over the highlights very quickly if I could, Mr. Chairman. Section 1 creates all the typical definitions that we have in all bills. This is a long bill because a lot of those just happen to be what those definitions are. But they talk about the different roles that people play in this. Obviously, there's a consumer, there is a controller, and there is a processor of data. A controller is the person that alone or jointly determines the purpose and the means of what are they going to do with your data. And a processor is a person that processes your personal information on behalf of that controller. Imagine that being more of the middleman. As you go through the bill, it also outlines certain elements such as selling information, target advertising, profiling people. There has been several documentaries that have been put out that many of you seen how we're target marketing, especially in the social media side of the house, everywhere from young children to adults to senior citizens, in order to use their information, sometimes almost against them, to pull them into things. As you continue on, it talks about what a controller can and cannot do. It's limiting the collection of personal information to what's necessary. I'm going to give you a current analogy of today that you may have thought years ago. How many of you went to the doctor over the last 20 years and the doctor said, put your social security number on all these forms? I always said, no, you don't need my social security number at the doctor's office and to put it on 9 different forms. Well, they never really needed it, but people kept giving it to them, so they just kept taking it. In this case, the same thing is true with your digital footprint. They should only take the information from which they absolutely need, that is business necessary. Or they can, again, ask your permission. Each one of you have gone to websites over the last year, and the first thing that pops up says, do you want these necessary cookies? Do you want all these cookies? You want all this information? But you then, as a consumer, get to make a choice. And I think we all believe that giving consumers a choice is the right answer. Also gives you the ability to delete your information. Let's say you went and purchased something online I bought some new dress shirts. Well, if I want to have them take my data out of that system later, because I don't want them to continue to hold on to it ever, it's a simple ability to opt out of their systems and have my data cleaned off. Now, you may hear someone say, and this is really a false narrative, so I want to address this issue, that, well, let's say that you had water service at your house, and you decided that you were not going to pay the bill for whatever reason, and you owed $500 to the water company, and they turned your water off. You cannot then tell the water company to delete your data. 6 months later, come back and say, turn my water back on, and you can't say that I owe $500. That's not true for any business. As long as you owe money to someone, you are always a client. Your data can always be held there. And if you have seen that argument, it is a false narrative that has been debunked in all the bills. Also talks about the processor and the different roles that the processor can and cannot play. This gets to targeted advertising, selling of your personal information. Remember, I said data is the current gold or oil of our time. People get your information and then they sell it to the next person because they know everything about you and they want to target you specifically. If I send a piece of mail to everyone in Roswell, Georgia, where I live, the hit rate on that is pretty low. But if I send it to just people who are a certain age that have children that might want to take them to ice cream stores, et cetera, now that's a very targeted, specific advertisement that is worth more money. The data is richer at that point. And again, we want to make sure that you're not sold when you don't want to. Also gives the Attorney General the ability, if people are breaking this law, to take action against them. And I'm going to skip through some of this stuff. This gives to the end of the year for folks to be ready to do this. Normally, as you know, we have bills come due once the governor signs them into law on July 1st. This gives an additional 6 months to our businesses to do that. I will tell you, most of these businesses are having to do this in one way, shape, or form right now because they do business in the other states that have these privacy laws. So in some cases, some are already prepared to do this, and others, this will be an opportunity for them to catch up. The last thing I want to mention is I am very cognizant, and I'm a small business owner myself, of impacts we put on businesses. This is actually a very simple one. If you're doing things right and you're upfront with your customers, this is actually a layup. If you are doing things nefarious, then you'll be held accountable. And lastly, if you had a really good business model where you were taking everybody's information and selling it target marketing, your business model will have to be with your customer's permission now. And I think that's right, just, and reasonable. So I know that was a lot. It's a big bill, Mr. Chairman. I apologize for taking so much time to introduce it, but I thought it was worthwhile to take you from beginning to end, and I'd be glad to yield for questions.
Thank you so much. Is that Representative Kendrick? Representative Kendrick, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My first question is, this is, a healthy bill, and I do appreciate what you're trying to do. Could you point to the line in the bill where it requires for us to opt out of the company data as opposed to opting in? I'm trying to find the line and I cannot.
That's going to take me a moment to scroll through the very specific part of that, Representative, but I will start looking. And if you've got another question at the same time, I'll keep looking.
Okay. I'm told it's line 260. So on line 260, since it is requiring that we, the consumer, opt out as opposed to opting in, can you explain why it wouldn't be better for us to be able to opt in as opposed to having to contact the company and opting out? Because I feel like that might, if we're trying to protect the consumer, it just is easier if the consumer has to affirmatively do something. Therefore, there's no doubt about using data or about the intentions, as opposed to somebody being silent and having to affirmatively do something in order for the data to be opted out. So could you explain the reasoning behind that?
No, and that's a great question. Thank you for bringing it. The issue is because it already exists today. Your information is already out there completely throughout cyberspace. So the opportunity now is to opt out. You will find as you get to some place for especially the first time, then it will ask you the question. But it gives you the chance to go into all those places that already have your information, that all included before this bill becomes the law of the land, that it's already there, that you can then opt yourself out of that information. And again, I'll use that example that you see a lot now when you go to websites. The first thing it does, it pops up and asks you, do you want just the necessary information and cookies, or do you want everything? Gives you the ability to do that. And then when you also go to certain sites, let's say you're shopping, et cetera, it gives you that point now to say, do you want to receive all this information? Can we market you, et cetera? And you check the box saying, no, thank you, I do not want to.
Representative Kendrick, Senator Albers, can you quickly, for the committee, give to them the left to right of if an individual does not feel that a company is, I'll say, treating their data appropriately, what is the process? And then what are the penalties?
Certainly. So there's a process. Let me just get to the right line here we're talking about. The first thing we do is if you're an individual, you can go to the company that you believe is having a problem and contact them and simply say, hey, I've opted out and you're still target marketing me. And they have a cure period in order to fix that. If they do not, or if you've asked them to delete your information out of the system, you can then take that forward, and that's where we have the Attorney General involved. Just let me get to that line and section, Mr. Chairman.
I believe it's 608.
Yeah. This is a big one. Yes, thank you. Beginning of line 608, the Attorney General has to be the exclusive authority in all of these matters. And you'll see that if you have a reasonable cause that a controller or processor has broken these rules, the Attorney General give them 60 days written notice to cure and fix that, right? The goal is we want to get your information either deleted or stop being targeted marketing. And the goal would be that, and I would hope most of the time that would be cured very quickly within that time frame or even shorter. However, in such case that it is not done, then it allows the Attorney General to provide further relief. That's on line 623. And you can, I won't read the entire part, but they can issue a judgment, relief, penalize them, as well as pay for any reasonable attorney's fees and costs. I do want to again make sure, because we've been talking a lot of different things as it relates to tort reform, this legislative session specifically does not include any new torts.
Thank you, Senator. Chairman Blackman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Albers, thank you. I'm going to ask probably some not so intelligent questions, probably ignorant to some of this, but I hope you'll indulge me.
It's only fair after all the ones I've asked you over the years, Mr. Chairman.
So you mentioned that if you're doing everything right now, then you're probably going to be doing everything right after this bill. So if I'm a bad actor now, what is the recourse? I noticed that listed all throughout or defined different protection acts and different things that I would have thought were already considered private information and private data.
Correct. So if you look at the bill, there is a series of folks that are exempt from this bill. And I want to just say that first and foremost. If you think about today, I mentioned earlier HIPAA, the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. That is already covered under federal law, as is things such as Graham-Leach-Bliley, which is the banking industry. There are certain areas under the electric grid that FERC and NERC and all the alphabet soups of acronyms come into play. So those folks are already outlined separately, and they are protected in their own right. So what falls under here today, you would think would be logically protected, and candidly, it's not at all. So once this becomes the law of the land on January 1st, 2026, at that point, all of those folks that were controllers and processors will have to adhere to this law. So they will have to begin following this to the letter of the law. And then again, as we as consumers, if we think they are not, then again, we can follow that process as the chairman said, beginning with contacting them and then getting to the attorney general, filing for relief. I don't believe that really will happen, to be candid with you, because we're not first to the table on this. As I said in the beginning, I hate when we're first, but I don't want to be last. I like to see other people get out there, make some mistakes. And to give you an example, many years ago, California was the first to pass a Consumer Privacy Protection Act, and it was a disaster. And it was followed by Colorado or Virginia, some other states that really did it poorly. But then as people figured it out and got it right and learned from that, we got to a consortium now where I believe that majority of the states have either fixed theirs or have just a great one, very substantially similar to this today. So the businesses, this is not going to be a surprise to anybody. In some cases, I talked to businesses, said, I'm glad we're going to have something in law so we can keep things consistent. I know you're going to hear from TAG in a little while, as well as TechNet. This is their number one priority. They've worked with us to endorse this bill, and they are our technology companies. You figure the folks that are doing this and using this the most, and they're helping drive the solution to what they know is a great answer for their business and their consumers.
Thank you, Matt.
Please.
So you mentioned across state lines. Is this only applicable as far as, the recourse here for data that's housed in Georgia?
Yeah, it's going to be for businesses and individuals who are in Georgia. So if the data is from a Georgia-based company or you're a Georgia-based consumer, then they will be admissible to that. That's why today, when you go to certain websites, they may be based in Colorado, or they could be based in Phoenix, Arizona, that already have a Data Privacy Protection Act, or in California or somewhere else. That stuff's already happening because they're already ahead of us in that manner.
Well, if I operate in Georgia and my data is housed, let's say, in a state that doesn't have this type.
Now, if your business is based here, that's where the data it will be held under.
So one other thing then, if from a competitive advantage standpoint, if I wanted to follow what it is you're trying to do here, rather, to gain some sort of competitive advantage versus this be a blanket law that applies to everybody, has that been considered? If I want to operate the right way and treat my consumers and my customers, one way versus somebody else that may not?
That's a great question. And that's why we crafted this to be substantially similar to everybody else who's put rational stuff forward, because we want to be right down the middle as saying, hey, we balanced that test between consumers and businesses, and we did it right. And this is why we want to stay the number one place to do business, is we threaded that needle, I believe, really effectively, where a couple of states have done something that candidly was kind of off in left field. And then we had one or two states do something that was really didn't do anything at all. And we wanted to make sure we fit in the middle of all those with the states that did it right. So I believe this will keep us right in line and being very competitive.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Chairman Blackman. Just a quick follow-up to Chairman Blackman's question, just so the committee has all the information it needs. Is it a business license that gives you the nexus, or gives the state the nexus and the attorney general to effectively place call it business underneath the auspices of this statute? Or is it something more than just a business license and operations within the state?
My understanding is the business license nexus with the attorney general. I am not a learned attorney, though, so I will yield to others that may be smarter in that area.
Okay, because the question, again, following up on Chairman Blackman, if it is a company that made the mistake of not headquartering in Georgia, shame on them, and they headquartered in, say, North Carolina, and 99.9% of their operations are there, but they may have a very small service center here in the state of Georgia, does that suddenly trigger this requirement against them when, frankly, they're just here to do service? And that would be a business license. Obviously, they would have to have, say, in Forsyth County to operate that service facility. And I'm just wondering, what is the intent of the author regarding, I'll say, the auspices of the attorney general being able to enforce against that North Carolina company?
Yeah, for my intention, that would be specifically if they are headquartered in North Carolina, they would be falling under North Carolina rules. Now, if they had a second headquarters here, employed 1,000 people and all their data centers were here, well, that would be something totally different.
Correct. Okay, I think one of the things we may want to do, Senator, just in the spirit of making sure we're getting the information out and vetting everything that we need to for this bill, is just to make sure that we have somewhere, maybe legal counsel can help us, that we have that language locked in here in terms of the intent, because I think Chairman Blackman brings up a good point. Would you like to have legal counsel look for that while you take the next question? Because we still have more questions and we have public comment.
I think he might be able to tell us that answer right now, if that's okay with you, Mr. Chairman.
Of course. Can you come, what number?
In numbers, yes. See number 16?
16.
Oh, he's been a tremendous help throughout this process.
You're live.
Thank you, Chairman. I would direct your attention to line 163 of the bill, which indicates that this article shall apply to a person that conducts business in this state by producing products or services targeted to consumers that exceeds $25 million in revenue, and contains a few other provisions there as well.
So I saw that in terms of the threshold on revenue and the threshold in terms of consumer records, and then potentially also the type of business you're doing. For instance, 50% of your business coming from the sale of data. Are you saying that what is dispositive is the phraseology on line 164 that says consumers of this state, meaning the of this state? Is that the nexus that we're looking at? And I'm not trying to split hairs and act like this is judiciary, but I think it's pretty important so that we make the distinction between the service center versus a second headquarters.
I appreciate the concern, and I can certainly conduct some additional research in that area, but I do know that our state also has a long-arm jurisdiction statute.
Yep.
That gets into whether minimum contacts have been established with the state.
Right.
And to the extent they have, I believe, and to the extent that they fall under the umbrella established here, they would fall under the jurisdiction of the.
Let me give you what my business issue is. My business issue is if they made the mistake of not headquartering here in Georgia and they did headquarter in North Carolina, I'm going to do everything I can to get them. And I think Senator Alvarez would join me in this. We want them to move their headquarters or put a second one here. I don't want them to tip their toe in here, suddenly feel like they are underneath some type of regulation they wouldn't be here, but for, and decide not even to tip their toe into Georgia. And now we don't even get them here to see how great our state is and to move here. So can you take a look at that? Because I think there's a transition period where we wouldn't want them to be subject to it. And then at some point, there's a trigger that suddenly they would be, but hopefully by then they made the wise decision to move from the Research Triangle to Georgia. Okay.
I would be happy to look
Okay.
at it.
I
Thank you.
appreciate that. Thank you. We have more questions, sir. Are you ready? I'm going to do the questions if it's okay, and then we'll
Sure.
do public comment, and then we'll come back and do other questions.
Sounds great, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Representative Barnes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator, I just wanted to ask about the line that you referenced in like 607, 608 about the Attorney General being the only one who can enforce this article. Does that not limit private right of action for consumers? Like,
That is true. This does not create any new private right of actions. The goal is not to expand that in Georgia. The goal is to keep it very focused on helping consumers resolve the issue. And the Attorney General, being our top law enforcement official of the state, we believe is the right person to do it. And this is exactly how other states are handling this issue.
all right, do you not think that that kind of limits some consumers if the Attorney General doesn't choose to take that case?
I believe the Attorney General would take any case that is not following just with Georgia law, but I also believe because of the way that the process is, you contact that controller or processor data and give them that cure period. Any company is going to fix that quickly because candidly, their issue is going to be reputational more than it is the Attorney General coming down. They don't want to get in hot water with their consumers.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good question.
Representative Barnes, Representative Tran.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for presenting this bill. So in Texas, the Texas law applies pseudonymous data when combined with other information so that it can be linked to data to an identifiable individual. Does this bill allow for that?
I'm not 100% familiar with the Texas bill. We did create a huge matrix of all the data privacy bills when we were working with the interested parties to make sure that they're all going to be substantially similar. But I'm not 100% particular, Representative Tran, with that part of Texas versus ours, but I'd be happy to look into that.
Chairman, one more question.
Of course.
So some of the other bills I've seen, the end result is a very lax enforcement of consumer privacy laws. And I'm concerned that this bill does the same. Can you elaborate on how consumer privacy protections are going to be enhanced?
Certainly, and I think, as I was mentioning earlier, there are some that went really far one way, and then there were some that did relatively nothing. We are right in the middle of that to balance, and my litmus test is to make sure we can balance consumers as well as we got to stay the number one place to do business. And I think we can have our cake and eat it too. When I worked with all the stakeholders in this, and we went through this, we painstakingly went through for that balance test on each and every issue. So what you have here is we clearly defined what the roles were. We clearly said that you have to be able to have that opt out. You clearly have the ability to delete your data. And if you don't follow those, there's a clear mechanism to cure that. And I will tell you that there's two states in particular that I think that they have a nice law that doesn't really do much at all. And I think there's three out there that are really off center completely. And I think the rest of us that all pulled our stuff in the middle have a really good balance. So I think we thread that needle very, very nicely.
Thank you.
Representative Beckles.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, I must say, Senator, thank you for bringing this bill, and you'll be my first person I'll be asking a question of since I got my cybersecurity law degree. So bear
All
with me.
right. Well, all right. Your Honor.
Okay. You mentioned data deletion. How are you going to address destroying consumer data defensively?
Well, I mean, each individual company is going to have to come up with their own policies and procedures of how to destroy data. So we don't prescribe down to the nth detail of how they're going to do that. There are obviously, as you know, because you are very well versed in this, and I'm a cyber guy as well. I've spent the last 30 years doing that, and did some graduate work at Harvard on that as well. So I understand where you're coming from. We can't prescribe down to the exact level of how, but I think we put in reasonable parameters of what they would use. We also had them reference NIST as a framework to use, which is in the bill as well. So I believe, again, I think we've come up with a good balance for that, but we haven't gone to that granular level, as you may have mentioned. And congratulations, by the way.
Oh, thank you. Mr. Chairman, just one more
Please,
question.
Representative.
Have you ever thought about maybe having a state privacy officer underneath the Attorney General's office? Because the Attorney General, as being the only entity covering all of this, might not be, the resources would be very limited.
Well, I love the way you think, and the answer is yes. Myself and Senator Anna Vitarte have been working on a bill to actually create a cyber force for Georgia, which would have a privacy officer as well as an entire cyber force to go against not just the crime, but the preparations for state and local governments and agencies so we can be better prepared. I think as a state, I was mentioning earlier about how we spend all this money on physical crimes for dollars, but all of it happens the other way. So I believe as a state, we need to enhance that. And I would love to work with you offline in order to continue to make that happen. I think it's critical for our
Yeah,
state.
you got it. Thank you.
Thank you.
You know how to reach me.
All right, I will.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Kendrick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do not have a cybersecurity law degree, just a regular one. But my question is about line 254 and through 256, saying that a consumer can invoke the consumer rights authorized in paragraph 2 by submitting a request to a controller specifying the consumer rights the consumer wishes to invoke. I'm trying to see how this works as a normal consumer. Do consumers know who controllers are of companies? 1, 2, does this request, it just says a request, can this be a verbal request, a written request? And then my third question is, you have to specify the consumer rights that you wish to invoke. If I'm looking at paragraph 2, I didn't even know those were consumer rights. So why not just allow the consumer to, instead of them specifying what consumer rights they want to essentially cut off, they just are able to either opt in or opt out totally or fully? Why do they have to specify? Because I wouldn't even know what rights to even write to a controller if I could find the controller.
Let me give you a use case if I could first. That might help before I answer the full question. So let's say you went and bought some shoes online. And when you bought to the shoe company, they controlled your data because you entered all the information about you, that you had to send it to your address, you put in your credit card, you put in your shoe size, all this information because you wanted to get yourself a nice new pair of shoes. Well, they work with a marketing company though, right? So they control your data, but this marketing company is the processor one because they're a shoe company. They're not good at that stuff. So they went and hired this marketing company to help do everything else. Well, they're the processor. So everybody's got a role to play. So you might go to the shoe company and say, I want you to get rid of my data, but they have to work with the processor because they have been working together in order to target market you, to resell your data, to all the other things that were there. So that's how I just want to give you a frame what it looks like. As far as opting out, the reason why it gives you choices, again, we think you should have consumer choice. You might want to keep some information with somebody intentionally. You might be a frequent shopper there. You might want to know about their specials going on. My wife and I like to travel a lot now as our kids have gotten older. So there are some things that, I want Marriott to send me those emails because we might want to go check out that new place you got in the Caribbean. So again, it gives options to people to do that. And I know your question in the beginning, you were talking about the opt-in versus opt-out, which I thought was an excellent question. Because your data is already out there all over the place, the goal is now you can opt out of all those things, but you'll get triggered. Do you want to do this or you don't want to do this? And you see this all the time in emails you get. Now we're all getting them ad nauseum text messages, right? I think we're all getting frustrated by those. But give you ability, unsubscribe, get me out, take me off your list, delete my data, allow me to do that. And I just want everybody to be able to have the digital footprint out there that they want, not what somebody else wants for you.
Senator Kendrick, I have a small dream like you, Senator Albers, that people actually read the terms and conditions instead of just hitting agree. I think they would, be more informed in terms of what's about to happen to them. But I'm pretty sure if I polled everyone in this audience privately, not make them raise their hands, every one of them would say when they're downloading their apps, they just hit I agree, and move on. I apologize, Representative Kendrick. I thought you were done.
So my question was answered, which was, if I'm a consumer, how do I know, one, who the controller is? Does this request have to be verbal or written? And the third question was, if I have to specify the consumer rights that are under paragraph 2, most people don't know what to ask for. I didn't even know there was this whole list of consumer rights. So why do they have to specify? Why can't they just opt in or opt out all in one? Because I can see, a loophole for the controller saying, well, you didn't specify, which one to opt out. And so we're going to deny your request. So that's my question.
Yeah, all this is basically going to be done online. There are some still people that will answer a phone call and go through this process. The reality is, if you're trying to limit your digital footprint, you're likely going to be doing it online. You're going to go to their website, and there are many companies that already have this today that allow you to go in there and eliminate your information. Sometimes they actually proactively send it to you and saying, this is what we hold for you, and give you an opportunity to take it out. I wish it was just that simple and that easy, just to snap a finger and make it happen. It's not that simple because this is a big ball of wax. It's wound up over time, and it's going to take a while for people to pull it back open. But I do believe this strikes the balance for a consumer to go to. They don't need to know everybody. They need to know who had their data first, and that controller ultimately is home base, because if they are working with other processors and controllers, their job is to work with them to get stuff out. Sometimes you're not going to know until it happens. So you're going to say, why am I getting all this target stuff? Delete my data. And one at a time, you're going to have to do that. Now, there is some talk about doing a state or national clearinghouse on all data in the future. There is a bill in California to do such right now. My guess is it's probably 5 years away, to be perfectly honest with you, when we'll probably be in a posture as a society to do that. And I think that's something we'll have to explore that when it comes, but it's not quite ready for mainstream. And I'm concerned about what can we do today to give people some relief and to claw back their privacy.
You still didn't answer any of my questions, but I'll
All right, we must be missing each other. My apologies.
Yeah. Representative Kendrick, what I'd like to do now is we have 2 folks for public comment. No, Senator Albers, you can remain. We'll have them up at the podium so you can listen. What we're going to do is we're going to go with Mr. Bruce first, then we're going to go with Mr. Rainey, do me a small favor, hold it to 180 seconds. Just because I didn't realize we're almost at 3 o'clock and we still have 2 more bills to go. So, sir, it's all. Can you please just introduce yourself, which organization you're from, and the 3 minutes will start.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you for T Squared and the many committee members of it. I'll keep with that. Christopher Bruce, I am the Policy and Advocacy Director of the ACLU of Georgia. Let me first say up front, this bill is not about partisanships or political games day. This is really about people. And again, Chairman Albers here has brought a bill that should be looked into. It's just we have a difference in opinion on how. And we're talking about the opt-in versus opt-out system. And I'll start there. And I think, Chairman Albers, you gave the best example personally. I was trying to come up with an analogy. Text messages. Nobody likes text messages, especially from people that you never talk to or anything else. This bill would allow companies to actually do that. They would allow them to text you without your permission, and you would have to opt out of it instead of going ahead and opting into it. As well as that, we're talking about people who get text messages from people that they never even knew. You know why? Because those companies share that type of data with other companies without, again, your permission. And then if you wanted a private right to action to that, you can go to the company, but you may not know who to go to. And also within that, well, now we have to go to the Attorney General because the company may have ignored you from it. Now you have to go to the Attorney General who has to do something within 60 days. This bill is flawed. I think we all agree, tech companies and other companies need to do something, protect your right to data. There are other states who do have a nice framework for this, like Texas, that you can build off of. Texas, supermajority Texas, has a better bill than this. Again, this isn't about being the last when it comes to passing bills. This is about being from best to worst. And this bill right now is the worst bill that you will pass in the nation. I yield for any questions.
I don't think you have any questions. I appreciate your time, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chairman.
Mr. Rainey, can you please just introduce yourself and which organization you're representing, please?
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I'm Mason Rainey with the Technology Association of Georgia, or TAG. TAG is the largest state technology trade association in the country, representing a little over 1,200 technology and tech-enabled companies and organizations. Currently, 20 states across the nation have passed comprehensive data privacy legislation similar to the bill before us today, and the need for these consumer protections have become clear. Our members value consumer data privacy, and TAG fully supports this legislation as written. As the chairman mentioned, this bill is substantially similar to those existing privacy laws. And we just want to thank Senator Albers for his hard work, collaboration, and bringing all the stakeholders together to get to this point, which has been well over a year in the making. And thank you for your time.
You have no questions. Right now, Senator Albers, what I'd like to be able to do is pardon me. I thought we had no questions. The Christmas tree just lit up. Representative Kendrick.
I have 2 amendments at the appropriate time.
Representative Kendrick, I was just about to tell Senator Albers, what I'd like to do is just go ahead and move to SB 9 right now. I think there's a lot to digest for the committee. And if it's okay with you, would you mind getting with Senator Albers? My goal would be is to have Stacy get a meeting for us, a room by Friday. So we don't wait till next Wednesday. And so my goal would be to bring this back up and ask Senator Albers to come back on Friday. So if you could speak to him between now and Friday, that would be perfect. Okay.
And if I could have 10 seconds to wrap up before you introduce.
I was just about to offer you those
Thank you,
10
my
seconds,
friend.
but for every second you take now, you take away from 9.
I sincerely appreciate the feedback from the audience and my friend at the ACLU, not saying that he's wrong, but nothing he said was really right either. I would just say that we work very closely and we know what all the other bills do. And this is, again, to make sure we have the balance that's there. We do not want to be California ever. And we believe we struck the right balance, working with the right key stakeholders to do that. So to say otherwise would not be accurate. And I believe what you have in front of you will answer any questions. We'll certainly work with any of your committee members in order to make sure that it has got the right solution. But I believe we're there.
Thank you, Senator Albers. And I would encourage everyone on the committee, if you have any questions or concerns, to grab the senator over the next 48 hours, maybe not literally, or the Attorney General will have an issue. Chairman Crow, did you have something? Oh, okay, great. Thank you, Chairman Crow. What I'd like to do now, if you don't mind, if you could switch your 111 hat to your 9 hat
Certainly.
and start with 9, please.
That's great. Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. Senate Bill 9 is a conglomeration of work that Chairman Thomas and I have worked on. As I mentioned earlier, the combined committees between the House Subcommittee and Senate Subcommittee, Senate Study Committee came up with a series of foundational items. And Senate Bill 9, in a moment, I'm going to turn over to you. Everybody's concerned about not just their privacy protection when it comes to their data, but how people are using these very, very powerful artificial intelligence tools moving forward. We have seen it happen in so many different places now. It should bring people genuine concern. And we as a state, I think, have found a great way to address that. So if I could, I'd like to turn it over to your Vice Chairman in order to take us through, because this is some of the language that he is working on so hard the last 18 months.
Senator, I think that's appropriate, especially given your opening comments about an hour ago about how the House and Senate work together. I didn't note, but I know you probably implied it that the House had led on that. So I sure do appreciate
Without
that.
question.
Yes. So Chairman Thomas.
First of all, let me reiterate the appreciation that spending the year together and working through this and all these meetings. And several of the issues that we discussed have now come to fruition. We have HB 171. I know this was a companion bill, and a part of 171 and SB 9 was discussion about election integrity and various issues in that matter. So we have made some modifications to SB 9 that many of you may remember this bill last year. It passed out of that Georgia House of Representatives, and it was HB 986 last year. This is the version that actually passed out of Senate Judiciary as well. It does have one small change, and that one small change is the first offense is now a misdemeanor versus where last year it was a felony. That's one of the major changes to it. With that being said, there's 21 states have now passed this some way, shape, or form of this legislation. I find it ironic that our neighbor to the west has passed almost an identical version of this bill. It passed the House 100-0. It passed the Senate 35-0. This is a bipartisan. This is a bipartisan piece of legislation because people have identified across the United States that this is really going to become a major problem. We've been the leader in this. The language we wrote has been disseminated in some way, shape, or form to 21 different states, and that's something we should be proud of. It was well baked right here in this room. So with that being said, I'd be happy to open up for questions. I have discussed this bill significantly over the last year and a half, so I'd be happy to take any.
So Kendrick.
For history's sake, could you remind me, did we pass it out of this committee last year? And was it unanimous?
No, it wasn't unanimous. It was unanimous out of the committee. Yes.
Okay.
And then on the floor, on the House floor,
I didn't get the House floor vote on it.
I'm going to say like 153 to 20.
Yeah.
But I mean, we can look it up for you, Representative Kendrick. I mean, it was overwhelmingly bipartisan, but there were some no votes. Yeah. Representative Kendrick, are you done?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Let me ask, in terms of the will of the committee, I know that we typically listen twice and then move, but given the fact of the history of this bill and the language of this bill, anyone have any objections to acting on this bill? So I have a motion from Chairman Prince. Do I have a second? Any discussion? Okay, no discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Congratulations, you're on the rules. Senator Albers.
Congratulations,
Chairman
Mr.
Thomas.
Senator Albers.
It was
on the
nothing
rules.
really. I'm going to head over to finance to get these very important House bills moving.
And if you could, Chairman Hustetler is expecting me, but I had worked with him to come a little bit later, so I'll be there ASAP.
I will cover you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Chairman Anavatardi, get in yet? Is he here?
Yeah, he was out in the hallway. He's in the hallway. Yeah, there he is.
Take this. This is good, Rick. Chairman Avatardi, I'm going to hand you off to the vice chair of the committee, as I have to go present in front of Senate Finance, okay?
Hold a seat for me. I got some bills to fix when I get over there. It's not yours though, Todd. Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry.
So good to see you, Senator.
How are you, Mr. Chairman?
I'm just fine. We got some fixing to do, but not maybe on this one. We'll see.
We will have a small change.
Okay. All right. With that said, I believe we're ready to go. I'll go ahead and recognize you, Mr. Senator.
I appreciate it. I don't have the recent bill in front of me, but I do have some comments. I'll try and be short and then just turn it back over to you for.
We're gonna,
any questions.
yeah, we've got a copy we're gonna hand to you.
Senate Bill 177 LC 473363. This bill addresses two significant issues. One, transparency and representation by lobbyists representing hostile foreign nations, individuals, entities with questionable connections to foreign hostile governments, funding of protests and political activities by hostile foreign governments. And the second issue is addressed by requiring registration disclosure of foreign funded organizations that are engaged in political activity. This bill passed the General Assembly last year fairly overwhelmingly, and basically was vetoed for a language correction, and we've made that language correction and even condensed the bill. So I'll turn it back to you, Mr. Chairman, if there's questions, and then we have like a fix.
See who's sitting at number 2. Prince, you have one question, Chairman Prince.
Hey, thank you, Senator. Do you mind talking to what those changes what they are and where they are?
So basically, the changes that were updated were right around lines 39 through 43, and just the definitions of hostile foreign country.
So we just identified those things.
Yeah. Tom Rollins is with me also, and I think he has some language he's refining with some others. Here he comes. That we want to present to maybe upgrade this bill a little bit more.
And we'll do that after.
When you're
wrap
ready.
up with the questions, yeah.
Yes, sir.
Representative Tran.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Thank you, Senator. I've got a couple questions. The first is you don't point to a federal government or federal agency list of foreign countries. So in other bills, we pointed to the Department of Commerce. I actually prefer to point to the Department of Defense that lists out actual companies and agencies and countries. Why are we not pointing to a DOD or Department of Commerce?
I'm gonna let Tom, because he worked on the legal part.
Thank you. So I'm sorry, Tom Rawlings. I'm the person who helped draft the bill, and been working on this policy issue for State Shield. So we ran into this issue last year. There's a question: should we refer to, for example, the Commerce Department 15 CFR, 7.4? I think there was some question. Do we fix it now, or do we just simply make that reference? And I think what we decided to do here was simply hit I'd say the 4 main countries that are on all of these lists: Iran, North Korea, Russia, and China. But I understand that there are other ways to do it.
Couple of follow-up questions.
Go ahead.
Follow up to that. Wouldn't it be more effective, though, if we could point to a direct list of foreign organizations under those countries versus just a blanket statement of those countries?
So in the current bill, I'm sorry, just to clarify, in the current bill, we do have the countries named: Democratic People's Republic of Korea, Iran, China, and Russian Federation. But you're suggesting we should
point
refer to the federal list or?
So the Department of Defense provides a list of companies, nonprofits, just agencies and organizations operating within those countries that are known to be enemies of our state,
I
right?
got
So
you.
why not point to those specifically versus just say a country?
Well, that's a good, that could be a good way to do it. I think what we wanted to go with were to make sure that we were targeting countries that have been designated, at least by the Commerce Department. Obviously, the Defense Department has another list, who are designated as known hostile foreign adversary nations. And then, of course, entities strongly connected with those nations, but with no significant U.S. connection.
One last question, Mr. Vice Chair. I appreciate that as we do trade with countries like China, where we literally bring them into our country, into the state of Georgia, walk them through our farmland, our ports, even our military installations. It can be quite confusing, right? While the DoD list is very specific. But let's look at about line 103, starting with 6, 7, 8, and 9. What does any other person other than a hostile foreign principal mean in this context? Why isn't that defined?
Which lines are you looking at again?
103 through 106.
Detailed statement of each activity with the registrant is performing for the.
I'm sorry. Starting with 106, 106 or 107, 107, my mistake. Section 7. And in that the hostile foreign principal, you haven't defined that.
You can see the confusion on that. The intent there, of course, is that if you're required to register, you have a good bit of stuff you need to disclose, including others for whom you're acting. Now, if that needs to be modified in any way, I'm certainly open to it.
And actually, one last question, and that's the minimum threshold on this bill. Are you saying a $5 donation could have an impact or influence?
Yes, I mean that is our it's zero. I mean, zero is what we're asking for.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Representative Kendrick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have 4 questions. The first one is on line 55. You have this 20% threshold, which seems a bit arbitrary. So tell me a little bit more about why is 20% if the overall goal is protection and transparency? Why 20%?
I believe you're asking about the 20% threshold. The idea, of course, was to, in business, if you own 20% of a company, you own 20% of an organization, that's a fifth of it. That's a fairly decent threshold for showing you have significant authority within that organization.
And then my 2 through 4 questions are on line 67 through 69. That talks about the 10 days to file with the commission registration statement. So my first question is there not a federal act that covers what you're trying to do? The second question is, would the Ethics Commission not be preempted if there is a federal act to cover it? And then my third question is, are we allocating additional funds for the Ethics Commission to have to do extra stuff with respect to a foreign agent? Because I don't see any provision for additional funds or staff in here.
Thank you for the question. So I think as it relates to the State Ethics Commission, I mean, I think this is pretty straightforward. I mean, I think in terms of managing this, I mean, they would know how to manage this. In terms of additional funding, that's not been discussed, but I think in terms of the registration, I mean, right now, unless you know something I don't know, I don't know if, you know, how many organizations maybe would fit into this bucket that would need to register with the state. I think if there is, then this bill's doing its job to make sure that we don't have foreign dollars influencing our state government.
Can I have one more follow-up question? So my original question was, isn't it already, what you're trying to do already preempted by federal law, and is that going to cause issues?
I think in some regards, around lobbyists, I mean, it's against federal law. It's actually probably borderline treasonous if you're taking money and you're not registered or transparently disclosing that. But that doesn't mean to say that this political activity, you know, just in terms of what we've seen on college campuses, even beyond what happens in this building, is being disclosed. So I don't think those dollars are being disclosed. And also nationally, I don't think that's being disclosed either.
I'll recognize Representative Beckles.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question is in line with Representative Tran. Why are we not using the Department of Defense's list of countries? We just identified 4. There are probably about a list of 10 or 12. I don't know the exact number, but I think we should be using something that's already in existence, not just choosing countries at random.
Right. So I don't think these countries are well documented. I mean, we can go back to I mean, the stories and things we heard during the Biden administration, we've heard during, I think, certainly the Trump administration. And I thank you for your, you know, recognition of, you know, I think the work Defense Secretary Hegseth is doing related to, I think, some of the issues we saw just even recently in the last 24 hours, you know, concerns about Iranian drones and technology that Iran is funding the Houthis, you know, related to these countries. So, I mean, these countries are well documented, whether they're on the Commerce departments or defense.
I just was because I've had
Go
this
ahead,
conversation before. If you don't mind, I'm going to interject myself here.
Please.
HB 113 that was heard in governmental affairs has a very similar structure as what it is that you're trying to take a look at. That one did move. It does discuss foreign companies of concern, and that may be a good fit for what it is that you're trying to work on right now. It might take care of some of these concerns that you're talking about. And I apologize if I wasn't fully engaged, but we were trying to find that language for you. We've got it pulled up here. With that being said, we have several people that have signed up to talk on the bill. I'd like to go ahead and get them moving. I've got the list here in front of me. First on the list is I'm an MDOD from, I'm assuming that says Care, Georgia. Hopefully I got all that right.
Yes, sir. It's Iman. Okay, I'll go ahead and begin. Mr. Chairman, committee members, thank you for your time. My name is Iman Emdad, and I'm the Policy Associate at Care Georgia. We're a Muslim civil rights organization, and I'm here today to ask y'all to oppose SB 177. In short, the bill is so overly broad that it would be unworkable. The definitions of a hostile foreign principal in lines 28 through 30 and foreign supported political organization on lines 33 through 38, of course, this is the old version, are incredibly broad, and together they would capture business transactions. Foreign supported political organization is defined as, in summary, any organization that receives money or a thing of value from a hostile government, principal, or agent that engages in political activity in Georgia. But it does not exclude receiving a thing of value in exchange for payment. And that oversight brings business transactions into the bill. Now, because a hostile foreign principal includes a business in a hostile country, this implicates any multinational company that does business in, say, China, and also lobbies for their interests in the General Assembly. There's another layer to this problem, and it's one that we see consistently throughout the language of SB 177. There are no minimum thresholds, as Representative Tran pointed out. The lack of minimum threshold is a significant problem on the income end. If anyone in the foreign principal category donates as little as $1 to an organization doing political work, that organization is captured like under the purview of the bill. Finally, there's another issue that's so specific that it could be easily missed, and that has to do with the definition of a non-resident alien. So the problem is that there is no formal definition in SB 177 or anywhere else in Georgia code. The only definition that we have comes from federal tax law. If SB 177 intends to rely on that definition, that opens up a whole host of workability problems, because non-resident alien is an umbrella term referring to anybody who isn't a U.S. resident isn't a U.S. citizen or permanent resident. That includes every different type of visa, but each visa type requires a different period of time in the U.S. before that visa holder is considered a resident alien. That means that in order for a nonprofit to ensure that they aren't taking money from a non-resident alien, for example, we would have to put a section on our donation page collecting each donor's immigration status and the amount of time that they've been in the country. We would then have to have a staff member review all of them, compare that to federal law to determine who is and is not a non-resident alien, and then return the donations of non-resident aliens from China, Russia, Iran, or North Korea. And that would take an enormous amount of time and resources, not to mention expertise. I don't want enemy governments interfering in our politics, but I also want laws that are clear and workable. And unfortunately, SB 177 is neither of those. And for that reason, I ask you to please oppose the bill.
All right, thank you. I don't see any questions, so we're going to move on. I'm going to do my best to read this. Tom Fon with Asian American Advocacy Justice Atlanta. Hopefully I got all that right.
I'm sorry. Tom Fan, Asian Americans Advancing Justice Atlanta. Thank you very much, Mr. Vice Chair and members of the committee. My name is Tom Fan. I'm a Senior Policy Associate with Asian Americans Advancing Justice Atlanta, which is a nonprofit that advocates for the rights and protections of Asian Americans and immigrant populations in Georgia. I'm here today to oppose SB 177 due to the burdensome reporting requirements and harsh penalties opening nonprofit groups up to potential criminal investigation. The bill requires recurrent submission of exhaustive information that can inhibit people's First Amendment rights with no due process protections for organizations. The bill would have a chilling effect on free speech, and as described in lines 156 through 160, unless there's a change in the sub, would force organizations to furnish detailed accounts of the money spent and activities performed, which will also have to be updated every 90 days as detailed in lines 167 and 168. Lines 174 to 184 grant the Ethics Commission the ability to assess fines to organizations and businesses between $10,000 and up to $200,000 for failure to meet reporting requirements. These could even be initiated by the Attorney General as described in lines 178 to 184 and result in a temporary restraining order and possible criminal investigation. With this overly broad language, which could capture any organization or business for expressing themselves, the bill is simply not workable, and we have no amendments to propose that would improve this legislation. We ask that you oppose the passage of SB 177.
All right, thank you. And I see no questions, so we're going to move on. Chris Bruce, ACLU, you're recognized.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Christopher Bruce. I'm the Policy and Advocacy Director of the ACLU of Georgia, an organization dedicated to supporting and protecting the civil rights of all Georgians. Let me start off with SB 177 is modeled after the federal government's Foreign Agency Registration Act. This is something that's already been pointed out in committee. It requires agents of foreign principals to register with the federal government. So SB 177 adds an additional layer of state regulation that is both duplicative and inconsistent with federal law. One of the most egregious inconsistencies is that SB 177 lacks exceptions for bona fide businesses, religious, academic, and press activities. This means that even private for-profit businesses that merely do business overseas could end up being subject to state regulation requirements. SB 177 also imposes unnecessary restrictions on political speech, something that the ACLU is definitely concerned about, by requiring individuals and organizations who engage in political activity, which is broadly defined in this bill, to register with the state simply based on their perceived foreign connections. The political activity that would subject individuals and organizations to regulation could be protected speech, raising serious First Amendment concerns. This bill could create a chilling effect on political activity, discouraging groups from speaking out on important issues for fear of government scrutiny. And finally, SB 177 is overbroad and grants full enforcement discretion to the Attorney General. It increases the risk of selective enforcement. The bill defines hostile foreign principles, foreign supported political organizations, and other terms using vague terms without clear definitions. Legitimate businesses, nonprofits, advocacy groups, and individuals with international ties could be unfairly targeted. This lack of specificity grants excessive discretion to the government, increasing the risk of selective enforcement based on political motivations. Past efforts to regulate political activity have shown that broad government oversight can be used to suppress dissent. Again, another First Amendment concern. So for all those reasons, we ask that SB 177 not proceed and votes no. Thank you.
All right, seeing no questions, my last person on the list I've got is Lloyd Abram with the Georgia Manufacturers.
Mr. Vice Chair, PAM requests,
Waive.
waiver.
Yeah, you can waive. That's fine. I don't think anybody up here is going to complain. So with that, we've got this is going to be hearing only. Senator Avatari will continue to have some conversations, and we'll be happy to catch up with you here in the next day or two. See what we can do about moving this along. All right. With that being said, we have a presenter. Actually, I'm sorry. You're right. I should open this. Do you have any closing comments?
Sure. No, I'm good. Thank you.
He's nicer than me.
I don't know about that.
But I do know.
I'm kidding.
Several of us have to get on this couple other committees. So we have a presentation from a company called Hall Hub here. Who exactly is feel free to come on up, introduce yourself, and
Yeah, I got a
okay, do you, Patrick?
got a flash.
What the heck?
There's sub available for SB 179.
That's what happens. There's not.
There's no sub. Oh.
My name is Brandon Hunley. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for allowing me to present. Thank you, Ali, for helping connect the dots. I don't know if y'all can. Oh, there it is. So I work for a company called Hall Hub, and I'm going to try to keep this fairly brief. And if y'all have questions, that'd be wonderful. What I'm here to talk about today is a real challenge across the country. It's a challenge here in the state of Georgia as well, which is safety around work zones mostly. I can talk about efficiency, asset management, the infrastructure, all those kinds of things as well. But really at the heart of this, it's protecting workers and other staff, other folks, consultants, and folks that work for the DOT that are out on job sites on busy roads and highways. So I'm going to go through a couple things. I won't stay long on that slide. Essentially what Hall Hub does is we really solved this thing that we call e-ticketing. I'm sure y'all aren't very familiar with this process unless you've been on a work zone, you work for an asphalt company. But basically what happens is there's a process to move from a paper ticket or a receipt of material that's being delivered to a job site to a digital version, right? So on the left-hand side, you can see some images of storage rooms with boxes and boxes and boxes of paper. Those pieces of paper are essentially receipts for every load of material that's been delivered to a DOT job. And the contractors and the material suppliers are required to keep those paper tickets for a certain amount of time, depending on the agency or the jurisdiction that they're in, but let's call it 7 years, in case they're audited, right? And so what happens when a paper ticket is created is a copy of that ticket is given to the truck driver that's picking up the load of material. So let's say it's an asphalt company. A copy of that ticket is given to the driver. The driver is also giving a number of other copies. So they drive the truck to the job site. They get to the job site, and then somebody at the job site runs up to the truck, jumps up on that truck, and grabs paper copies out of the truck cab, right? And those paper copies go to the contractor who's doing the work on the job site. And it also goes to the DOT inspector. A paper copy goes to the DOT inspector. In 2015, in Iowa, a member of the DOT in Iowa, an inspector out on a job site, was killed. He was a ticket taker. He jumped up on a truck. He got caught between heavy equipment and was killed. So there's a guy named Greg Moeller who worked for the DOT in Iowa who said, there must be a safer way to do this. We live in a digital world. Why are we passing back and forth paper tickets? And so the work of creating this concept of e-ticketing began. Years went on, people tried to kind of sort this out. It was very challenging. There are a lot of competing ideas on how you accomplish this. It's a little more complicated than you might think because every material supplier uses a different computer system to manage their operations. And to get these digital versions of these tickets, you have to tap into all of those different computer systems. And they're made by different manufacturers. And so this work went on for a few years, and then COVID hit. And when COVID hit, folks said, we don't want to pass paper back and forth, right? We don't want to touch things, at least for a little while. And so e-ticketing really took off. And back then, when I started doing this, I started talking to agencies, and it was really an efficiency argument. It was, you're dealing with boxes and boxes and boxes of paper tickets. You're receiving those tickets on a job site, and then you're assigning someone on your staff to scan those tickets and load them into a system, right? A paper ticket gets torn, let's say, or coffee spilled on it, and you can't read it anymore. Now you got to call the plant and say, hey, I need you to create me another paper ticket and send that ticket with a truck to the job site so I can collect that, right? Because ultimately the state pays the contractors off of these tickets. This is how you reconcile how much material was delivered to a job site and what was used, right? So that was the beginning of paper ticketing. Then we started looking, what does this mean when you start collecting data from a material supplier or a contractor that is destined for a job site? Specifically with us, it's typically DOTs because we work for public agencies at the city, county, and state level. But it's really more broad than that, right? And you guys have been talking about this all day in terms of protecting privacy, safety, security, and then ultimately what efficiencies and advantages can you drive pulling that data into your system. So this is a very wordy slide that we don't need to go into, but essentially the idea is from our perspective on a material on a work site, we're collecting material or materials information in, we're analyzing that data, we're then integrating with other systems that an agency would use, and we're kicking that data into those other systems, right? If y'all have spent any time with DOTs, and maybe this is just a public agency thing in general, they can be very siloed. And so the interoperability amongst the teams within the DOT is a challenge. And that's within just the DOT. And then you talk about getting it outside of the DOT to, whoever else might need it, other systems, other third parties. It's an ongoing challenge. So the goal of what Hall Hub does is we normalize that information when it comes into our system. And then we allow it to flow to other systems that might need it while we run reporting and grab lat longs for geospatial analysis and all that kind of stuff. So the goals for us, we try to keep it very simple, is that we need the data to be secure. We need the system to be scalable. We need the whole thing to be simple. And for all operators who are interacting with these systems, it needs to be standardized. There needs to be a normalized process that people understand. So to that end, all of the purple states, the dark purple states on this slide, officially use HallHub's DOT platform to manage this entire process that I've been discussing. Now, it's obviously much more detailed. There's a whole lot of other features on this. The light purple states are what we call still assessing. And that could be in a number of things. I'm not going to get into the weeds on that. Specifically, the state of Georgia, I've been meeting with for the past 3 years. And to give the DOT some credit, they were the first state to require e-ticketing, Georgia was, for DOT projects on asphalt materials. First state in the whole country, which was a big move. That was like three years ago when they put the requirement in. We helped the contractors in the state of Georgia, the asphalt contractors, meet that requirement. But that was all before we had this portal. And so now what I'm trying to do is get the state of Georgia, the DOT, to convert from this old e-ticketing process that we kind of helped them solve in the early days of e-ticketing to this new EDOT platform that these other states are using because it impacts their asset management, their efficiency, their interoperability with other systems, their reporting, essentially managing the process and the funds coming from the constituents that the DOT is spending. And then the other thing, of course, is safety, which we'll get to in a minute. This is maybe a little too in the weeds, but essentially the point here is it's hard to get data from a material supplier to a DOT. HallHub has connected with over 5,000 material plants across the country. It's a lot. A lot of asphalt, a lot of concrete, a lot of aggregate locations, rock, sand, dirt. We work with salt, we work with sand, really any material that is scaled. We scaled meaning weighed at the location that they're picking it up. We work with, and we have solutions for kind of all the different operators. Really the point here is that no contractor or material supplier can be ruled out of this, right? You don't want to put a system in place that makes a contractor say, I don't want to bid on that project because I don't have the technology to meet the requirement, right? So we basically solve that for all the contractors and the suppliers. This kind of gives you a sense of the flow. So the ticket data comes from the supplier, goes into the mixes. We start gathering information from the plant. It then gets over to the DOT. The inspector starts to put information into the system on that material. We allow the inspectors to pay code that information or attach bid items to that to make their job more efficient. Typically, like I said, what an inspector would do is they collect all the tickets, and at the end of the day, they would have a bundle of tickets, and they would have to hand enter all those tickets into a system, hand write notes on those tickets. This system basically removes all that process, which addresses another challenge, which is workforce. States across the country tell me all the time, we do not have enough inspectors for all the projects that we have that we're working on, right? We're building roads and we do not have inspectors to put on there. Just had a call in Missouri yesterday. And this was like the bulk of the call was how do we handle projects where we don't have inspectors? Our answer to that is we need the work site to tell us a lot more. We need the job site to tell us a lot more about what's going on. So this gives you a little bit of a view in terms of what this looks like in our system. So once again, all the information that's up on the screen, which is very, very small, but the left-hand side is a mobile device. That essentially is a replacement of what a paper ticket would be. So it shows you all of the data that's in that material load. In the old days with paper tickets, or maybe current days in some roads in Georgia, the paper ticket arrives with the truck. In the e-ticketing world, the ticket arrives about 2 minutes after the truck is loaded at the plant. So the inspector on the job site has it before the truck even arrives. And once again, they don't have to go to the truck to get any data, right? It's all on their phone or their tablet. We then start doing what Ali and I talk about a lot, which is digital twins or as-builts. So as loads are coming into the job site, the system is geolocating those loads of material, where they're going on the roadway, right? Where they're being installed. And if you think about, if you're an asset manager for a highway, it's pretty useful if you have, let's say, you have a failure on one of your roadways. In our system, you can go find that exact spot on that roadway, and you could see the exact load of material that went in there, what plant it came from, what day it went down, what contractor was using it. Why might that be important? Well, it might make sense to go start inspecting some of the other projects that use material from that plant on that day, because they might also see failures, right? If it was a material issue. And these are things that affect drivers on a day-to-day basis. So a couple years ago, Delaware submitted an application for a grant, what's called an ADCMS grant, Advanced Digital Construction Management Systems. They were awarded that grant with 3 other states, Iowa, Illinois, Nebraska. And we were the technology partner. Iowa State University is the research partner. And what we're trying to do with that grant is essentially increase safety. So Delaware came to us and said, hey, look, we are trying to better alert the traveling public when there are work zones on our roadways. And there's this big gap when we talk about work zones, which is what is an active work zone, right? We all are probably used to driving down the road and you see a sign that says work ahead. And then is there any work happening? Hard to say, right? I see you shaking your head. Well, so, my argument would be, and our argument in general is, if you tell the traveling public that there's work ahead and you tell them over and over and over again, and they drive down the road and they don't see any work, what do they start to do? They start to ignore the sign, right? They start to ignore the notification. We also have notification fatigue generally. Anytime I get a new phone, I load all my apps on, I say no to every notification option that comes on my phone because I don't want to be notified except for Slack and like messages from my wife, right? And I think I think everybody deals with that. And so our argument is, can we provide the traveling public with real-time worker presence notifications that when if I'm driving down a highway in Georgia and I get a notification on my Google Maps app or my Waze app and it says workers present ahead, slow down, and I drive 100 feet down the road and there are workers present right there, right? That's the goal of what Hall Hub is trying to do from a safety perspective. And that's what this ADCMS grant that Delaware has awarded built, essentially. So the way this works is we allow DOTs to say, okay, here's where our work zone is, right? From this mile marker to this mile marker, whatever it is, they build it in our system. Long-term, we'll dynamically build those. And then our system knows the material is being delivered to a job site. If a load of asphalt is being delivered, then we can reasonably assume there's somebody there to receive that load of material, meaning there's somebody on that job site, right? Whether it's a contractor or a DOT inspector, right? Yes.
I hate to do this to you, but I promised the committee I would make this 15 minutes.
How long have I gone? I'm sorry.
We've gone about 18.
Okay.
But I understand, look, digital twins, I think I can speak for the entire committee. We're super excited about the idea of any type of advancement in transportation.
Yeah.
But if I give you 60 more seconds, I mean 60 more seconds, can you get to the, I'll call it your best slide or your best comment or whatever it is that it is and wrap this up?
Yeah,
because I do need to get them to other committee meetings.
Got it.
please.
I thought
Okay, thank
I
you.
heard 4 earlier and I got confused. Okay. Let me find my best slide. Me? No. Okay. So, this is probably, I guess this is it. Okay. So the goal here is real-time notifications. That's the goal here. This does not exist in the marketplace as we speak, right? Well, it does because of us. In fact, we're working with FHWA to help define what an active work site is, right? So the point here, and I guess what I'm trying to get across to y'all is Georgia has a real opportunity because Georgia led so early on e-ticketing. They're already receiving a lot of the information that would power a system like this to provide real-time worker presence notifications to the traveling public, therefore reducing work zone incursions and accidents, right? You had a number of deaths in Georgia on work zones just last year, and reduce congestion around work zones by providing better information to the mapping platforms. These worker presence notifications, that's Waze on the screen. We send these worker presence notifications to Apple Maps, Waze, Google Maps, and the Work Zone Data Exchange. So these mapping platforms that the public is using every single day can better inform, and Georgia has a head start compared to other states. We just need the DOT to implement the new version of where this is heading, because right now where they were leading, now they're kind of falling behind.
I appreciate that. You don't have any questions.
Okay.
As you know, we're a legislative body, so we don't handle procurement. Of course. But I wanted to make sure that the committee knew exactly what was occurring. And I think for all of our constituents, we'd like to do everything we can to get them through there faster, find detours, and frankly, keep all of our workers safety, because we want all Georgians to go home with all 10 fingers and all 10 toes every night. Okay.
I appreciate that.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And we are adjourned.
That's it.